Well, today we are talking with Madeline Martin, New York Times bestselling author, actually internationally bestselling author. Hi, Madeline.
Hello, Doris. Thank you so much for having me here today.
You're welcome. All right, Madeline, we're here to talk about your newest book called The Secret Book Society. And It's set in Victorian England. And I'd like for you to start by telling us a little bit about how many restrictions were placed on women in that era.
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of restrictions placed on women, and it was different restrictions for different classes. And so with the Secret Book Society, this sort of deals with more of like the women who are in sort of the upper echelon of society. The main one that really is about that this book is about is the restriction on the reading materials. And really, women were not really encouraged to read. They felt that it gave them opinions that differed from the men in their lives, heaven forbid. It basically, it led to promiscuity. They felt that it took them away from their roles as wives and mothers. And, they also felt like women didn't really have the emotional fortitude to go on the journey that a novel would take them on. Excuse me. And so they were afraid that it would lead to hysteria and that kind of thing. But, women, especially the women who were in very high classes, they had so many social rules that they had to adhere to. And a lot of that really is illustrated in the Secret Book Society with what these women are going through.
And so tell us a little bit about Lady Duxbury. Who is she? What is her history?
So, Lady Duxbury is the enigmatic countess who has been widowed three times, who brings all of this together. And yes, there definitely has been some talk about the possibility that maybe she murdered her husbands. But she is a very wealthy woman. She's a woman who has very high esteem in in society, and so she's that person that everybody invites to the party and everybody hopes shows up, and then she never shows up, and people are always disappointed. So like the one time a year she makes an appearance, everyone's like, oh, Lady Duxbury's here. So she's this very like enigmatic, very mysterious character. And I painted her like that intentionally. I wanted her to really understand what these women were going through and understand them on this deep level that they don't understand until her secret diary is discovered and her past is revealed in little juicy tidbits, which I think is the best way to have things revealed.
Yes, it is. It is. It's an exciting book. Well,
Thank
tell us a
you.
little bit about the struggles that um, afflict Eleanor and Rose and Lavinia.
Yeah, so with these three women, these are the three women who essentially get invited into Lady Duxbury's home. These are women who are having their reading materials restricted, that Lady Duxbury really wants to open up her very extensive library to welcome them to read her books, to really understand the female characters, to be empowered by them, and also hopefully help empower one another. So we have Rose Wharton, who is an American dollar princess, which I've always been fascinated by, these very rich heiresses in America who essentially get sold into marriages into these wealthy aristocrats. So basically, if you've been following the Gilded Age, you have just seen this whole wedding
Yes.
take place. So I think a lot of people understand what this. So you understand why it's so fascinating for me. And Rose really would have been one of the first people who would have gone over as an American dollar princess. So her character was really interesting to write from that perspective as well. Also, as an American who has traveled to England, there is
Yes.
kind of like that. We speak the same language, but it's a totally different world sometimes. And then we have Lavinia, and Lavinia is sort of the younger one in the group. She's in her early 20s, and she is actually I kind of modeled her after Florence Nightingale, who, as we know, is sort of like the foundational member. Like she's really the one who started the Red Cross. And when she was younger, she feared that she suffered from hysteria. And it's really that she just had all of these incredible ideas and she was so smart. And people really just weren't sharing their ideas because they were also repressed. So I really wanted Lavinia's character to suffer from hysteria or believe that she does, and then really kind of be harboring this like very passionate, amazing part of herself that she just has to slowly reveal over time. And then we have Eleanor Clark, and Eleanor is sort of the quintessential perfect English woman. She is beautiful. She has a son. Her husband's one of the most wealthy men in England. She comes from great stock. You know, she is aristocratic in birth, and she is absolutely miserable. She is probably the most oppressed of all of the women. And for her, you know, one element of her story that I really wanted to explore was Victorian fashion, and I wanted to do it in a way that I gave Eleanor the freedom to be able to wear what she wanted to wear, and that's all the freedom that she has in her life. Because with some women, that's all the freedom that they did have in life. And so, you know, her husband sort of passes it off as this like, oh, this flippant sartorial taste, but for her, it's everything. And so there's a lot of deep emotion that's layered in there.
Indeed, there is. What sparked this whole idea for this particular story? Because you've written many books, I think. Huh.
Yeah. So the first part was finding out that women, you know, really were not being encouraged to read. In fact, quite the opposite. Some of them were very much discouraged from reading. But also, I found this incredible story that is based on reality, because sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction, right? And I call
Mhm.
it the anti-Cinderella story. So basically, there is a husband. He's been having an affair with his wife's niece, and she, of course, protests, heaven forbid. And so he sends her off to a lunatic asylum to basically just get her out of the way, which is absolutely something that would have happened back then. That's, you know, sadly, it was so easy for women to kind of just be cast aside when they were in the way of anything. And so as she's in the carriage and she's on the way to the asylum, she sees a boy on the street, and she calls out to him, and she throws some money, and she says, "Please go to my friends and tell them that I'm being taken." And he said, "Well, how will they know it's you?" So quick thinking, she takes off her boot and she throws it out the window. And he goes to the friend's house with this boot, and he says, "Your friend has been taken." And they're able to hire a solicitor who actually specializes in helping women who have been wrongfully admitted to lunatic asylums, and they're able to free her. And I read that story and I said, wow, amazing.
Wow.
So with the Secret Book Society, it opens with Lady Duxbury's drawing room, and there's a street urchin there, and he has this black kid skin leather boot with rose embroidery along the laces, and he says, "Your friend has been taken." And there, at the very end of the prologue, there's a little secret sort of notch in the boot, and she sees an envelope in there, so she takes it out and she opens up this missive and recognizes her own handwriting, saying, "You are cordially invited to the Secret Book Society." So chapter one brings us 2 months earlier when all the women are starting to receive all of those notes. So maybe
Um,
you know who it is, but maybe you don't. Dun dun.
yes, yes, it's so much fun. And what what sort of an environment does Lady Duxburg offer these women? I mean, what is she doing? It's not just about books.
No, it's not about books, but it also has to do with the type of books. So first of all, she's bringing these women into a very close milieu where they really have the opportunity to speak openly, and they're encouraged to do so in a way that they really aren't able to do in polite society, where they have to sort of keep up these very rigorous walls to not let anybody in. But here they're allowed to express emotion, they're allowed to express feeling, and you know, at the same time they're reading these books that almost encourage it. So and this is one of the big things about this book too, is that the Victorian era really was very huge for female authors. And so as a result, you're having female authors writing female characters who are so much more real and so much deeper than they've ever been before. So before, I would hazard to say, like, so many of the female characters are really so two-dimensional. You have either the angel or you have the fallen woman, and there's really very little in between. And so with you know, Jane Eyre, I'm sorry, with the Bronte sisters and Jane Austen and Elizabeth Barrett Browning, I mean, all of these incredible authors who are coming out publishing these books, these women have depth, they have feeling. So, for example, you have Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen, and Mary Ann is this incredibly mercurial, very, very passionate character, and not once does anybody ever use the word hysteria or do they ever bring up a lunatic asylum. She is allowed to feel because she is a real person. You know, she's a real, has this depth.
Yes.
And then,
Yeah.
with Jane Eyre, for example, and that's another one where you have this precocious girl who has this, big thoughts and this teeny little head. And I think one of my favorite lines from it is when this priest is talking to her and telling her essentially she's a bad girl and she's probably going to go to hell. And what does she think about that? And she says, I will endeavor to remain in good health and never die. And so, it kind of is like, it's like showing that this girl is refusing to fit in this box that she's being told by society that she needs to be. And really, the whole book kind of goes along that same thing where she's finding her own path. And so these books are not only, showing women that it's okay to be who they are inside, they're also empowering them, telling them maybe you don't have to fit inside this box, and that's okay.
Yes, yes. So you write the story from several viewpoints. Was that a challenge for you?
It was interesting. I will say, so yeah, it was done from four perspectives if you factor in Lady Duxbury's diary. And so yeah, I've never written one from four perspectives before. It part of it was difficult just because I wanted to make sure that everybody, I think the hardest part was making sure that everybody got their opportunities to speak and that had enough of the story. But as far as the rest of it went, honestly, it was kind of fun getting to kind of dip into other people's heads and kind of explore a little bit more because when you do write, you can only really explain the voice of the head that you're in. And so
Right.
this gave me a lot of different perspectives to kind of play with. So it actually was really fun.
Really fun. And how much research did you have to do for this book?
Oh, I do tons of research. I usually have, I think with this one I had like 4 or 5 dozen books that I used, and like nonfiction. And so I don't read them all cover to cover. Sometimes I read like a chapter here and there, depending on what it is that I'm looking for. But so there's that. I also did get to go to London and I got to kind of explore some of the old Victorian townhomes, which was really cool.
Oh,
Yeah, how because they have like this amazing wallpaper, first of all. It's like these very, very garish, all these like paintings are very busy.
yeah.
Um, and they love to crowd stuff. There's like every single surface is covered with something. And then you have the wall sconces with the mirrors on them to help to kind of project that light out a little bit more, because otherwise the rooms could be very dark because they were either lit with candles or with gas. Eleanor, we see that she has electricity, which is a very unusual thing to have at that time. She's kind of one of the first homes. But yeah, so I mean, it really, all these kind of little things that build up to make the story kind of what it is.
Right, and real, and real.
Yes.
Tell us about your publishing journey. I understand that you've been writing for 20 years, but you said it maybe took you 15 before you really hit it big.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I started writing romance, and I've been with small presses. And I was with a small press in the very beginning, and then I was with Harlequin Historical, and then I started to do self-publishing. And then after self-publishing, that's when, gosh, so I feel like it's such a long story. So,
Yeah.
so basically, I was writing romance. I really wanted to write historical fiction, and I ended up being laid off from my job, which I had kind of, it's horrible to say, had hoped would happen because I was writing like 6 to 8 books a year, and I was working a full-time job as a business analyst, and my daughters were in everything, and frankly, I was exhausted.
Right.
So yeah, so basically, I thought, oh gosh, this is going to be so amazing. I'm going to get to have the house to myself. I'm going to be able to just work without having any distractions. And if you would believe it, that was February 2020, and the pandemic happened like 3 weeks later, and I was robbed. But
Yeah.
and the funny thing is, my husband, he still hasn't gone back to work, so he's still at home. But yeah, it gave me the opportunity to write The Last Bookshop in London. I had really wanted to write a historical fiction. Now, I will say that thinking about writing a historical fiction, having never done it before, was incredibly daunting because it does require so much research and the details are so very important. So
Mhm.
this gave me the opportunity to write The Last Bookshop in London, which was my first historical fiction. And
Mhm.
so with this book, I'm very, very grateful that it ended up having the amazing success that it did. And it's
Yes.
given me the opportunity to be able to write full time now for over 5 years. And
Um,
after over 15 years of like 4 hours of sleep a night, of never taking a sick day, of blood, sweat, tears,
Um,
and whatever else can, can come from everything. I am so incredibly grateful every single day for the opportunity to get to write full time and for this to be my job. I mean, it feels honestly unbelievable. So,
oh, yes, yes, yes. Hanover Square Press, that's an imprint of HarperCollins.
correct.
How did that deal come about? And tell us about your agent or how difficult it was for you to find a major publisher for this book.
Yeah, so I actually I'm sorry, Hanover Square, oh my gosh, Hanover Square Press. Sorry. I'm on book tour, so I feel like my mouth is
I
just
know you
tired.
are. Yeah, thank you for taking the time to talk
Oh
to us.
gosh, of course, absolutely. So Hanover Square Press is actually part of Harlequin, if you would believe it, and
Uh-huh.
then Harlequin is part of HarperCollins. It's all like
Yes.
so stacked and everything. So when I was writing Harlequin historical, I already kind of had like a good reputation with Harlequin because they
Sure.
knew that I wrote books with a lot of emotion, and they knew that obviously I was always timely with all of my stuff that I was doing, but also that I wrote with a lot of historical detail and research. And so when I pitched the idea for the last bookshop in London, there was an editor who heard about it and said, "Oh my gosh, like this sounds so good." And so it kind of, went from there. So it worked out very, very well. I was very fortunate, and it was kind of like where all of the different things that I had done had led to that point. So,
Yes, yes. What are the three most important things you have learned about writing and publishing that have enabled you to break through these terrible barriers that we have in publishing?
I think first of all is to have the confidence in your own writing. So that one is like if an editor tells you to change something and you feel like it's integral to the story, don't just change it because you feel like their word is gold. But conversely, don't feel like your writing is the best thing that's ever happened to the world and is a gift. I mean, I actually work with book coaches on a regular basis. What I do is I do read through my reviews. I see how people are liking my book. I see if there is any sort of recurring deficiencies. And then I hire a book coach that specializes in that particular category, and I work with them to help me improve whatever that area might need improvement on. And I'm actually also currently getting my MFA in creative writing. So there is no one author that is ever going to be 100% perfect, and you will always be able to find ways to improve your writing. So don't ever stop improving your writing. And then the third thing would be to advocate for yourself. And this is a very difficult thing for authors to do. Um,
Yes.
a lot of times we don't want to speak up because we don't want to be obnoxious. But the problem is if you don't speak up, sometimes you can slip into the shadows. And so, so I tell people, ask for it because the worst thing that they can say is no. And so, you want a Goodreads giveaway, ask for a Goodreads giveaway. If you want a New York Times Square billboard, they'll probably say no, but whatever, ask for it. You know,
That's
so so that's probably those are my biggest three, I think, for helping people.
that's very good advice. What's your writing schedule like? And I mean, how do you turn out so much material so
Um,
fast?
so I used to, when I was working so much, I used to joke that I was a full-time author, a full-time mom, and a full-time business analyst. And now I joke that I'm a full-time mom with this little writing gig on the side because, kids, kids can
Yeah.
somehow manage to take up a lot of time. So and then also, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity. I've been able to travel so much, but I probably travel about 30% of the year to different speaking engagements and events and book festivals. And
Um,
so I do travel quite a bit. So really, I kind of just fit it in wherever I can. So generally, I'm up like at 4 o'clock in the morning. This is sort of a byproduct of having to write while also working a full-time job. You have to sacrifice something, right? So I would sacrifice sleep and I'd wake up at 4. So I'm generally up around like 4 o'clock in the morning. And so that's a huge time where I get a lot of work done because Thankfully,
Yes.
the rest of the world is sleeping, so I'm not getting emails, and the kids are asleep, and sometimes my husband's asleep, sometimes he's not, but it generally gives me some quiet that I get to be able to focus. And then after that, once the household wakes up and the world wakes up, then it's just kind of managing chaos and trying to get in writing wherever I can.
Okay, well, Madeline Martin, author of The Secret Book Society, thank you very much for joining us today.
Absolutely my pleasure, Doris. Thank you so much for having me.